Making your own glow-in-the-dark greeting cards is easier than you may think. Let me show you how. In this video, I will show you 2 different techniques and offer tips so your creations will shine. Welcome to Amanda's Paper Crafting. I've got 2 different ways to show you how to use glow-in-the-dark embossing powder to take your cards to the next level. The first way I'm going to show you, I use for these 2 cards here. And what I did is I embossed the paper first and then cut out the die cuts. So let me show you how I went about that. Now for the type of glow-in-the-dark embossing powder I used is just this Lawn Fawn glow-in-the-dark embossing powder. So that's the type that I have on stock and that I was using. Now we're going to want to emboss the paper first. So I take my Versamark, and you want to get a nice thick layer of Versamark on your piece of paper. I probably could use to re-ink my Versamark stamp pad. Okay, that looks like a nice thick coverage. From there, just cover it. Okay, doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to be cutting our shapes out of this, but you do want good coverage. All right. From here, I'm going to heat emboss. Okay, so as you see, I've got a nice chunk of the white paper heat embossed with the glow-in-the-dark. This stuff comes out like, it's not completely clear, but it's like a light haze, I would say. But from here, what we would do is we would go ahead and take our die cut, cut it out through our machine, and then be able to create, you know, whether it be the ghost or for the jack-o'-lanterns, I did this exact same process, but I did it on yellow paper to get the jack-o'-lantern faces to glow in the dark. And then for this one, for the vampire face, I did the exact same thing. I did it on kind of like an off-white color and just die cut his face out of that. So that's the first technique. Now on to the second technique that I used for these 2 cards. For these 2 cards, I stamped the images first in their different inks, and then I heat embossed them with the glow-in-the-dark embossing powder. Let me show you how I did that. Now for this example, we're going to make a glow-in-the-dark moon with this stamp here. I'm using a honey color ink. I was always taught to swirl the stamp and then blot it a couple times to make sure you've got great ink coverage. And here we go. Apply a little pressure. And there's our moon. Now, of course, we want to go ahead and clean off our stamp. I'm just using a little stamp chamois for now. Now before we heat emboss, we want to go ahead and use, this is an embossing buddy, but what this little pouch does is it it helps to decrease the static, so that way you don't end up with little pieces of embossed powder around the design. You just end up with it on the design. Take our Versamark. Now, lining these up is going to be a lot easier if you have a MISTI. I do not. I just eyeball. So, we line it up. There we go. Putting some nice pressure on there. A little scrap piece of paper so we can pour the extra embossing powder back into the jar. We want good coverage. Here we go. And we head over to heat embossing. And there we go. So from here, what I'll end up doing when I go to use this moon is this one doesn't have a die cut, so I'll just cut it with my micro scissors, and I'll be able to use that element on another card. Now for some tips. I mentioned before this embossing powder turns out a bit hazy. I wanted to show you what I meant. I used just the Versamark and the glow-in-the-dark embossing powder with the witch's hat stamp, and I stamped it on a purple cardstock, and this is how it turned out. So you see, it's kind of like a gray haze to it. Yeah. I noticed with this embossing powder, it has like a slightly different texture to it than others when it's heated up. It's just not quite as smooth. But depending upon what effects you're looking for, you can just use the embossing powder with the Versamark, or you can use the other two techniques that I showed you earlier. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. If you have any tips or tricks you'd like to share, drop those in the comments as well. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Happy crafting, y'all.